Today, we are joined by Magnus Swann, the guy with the coolest name in history, and we are talking about his new solo project for his product design degree, Anemoic. It looks really, really cool, and we will, of course, be discussing Studio Underdog, which he has designed for, or does design for, as well as a little bit about his watch collection and just a little bit about him. He's a really interesting guy. So, let's get into it. So here is Magnus. How's it going?
Yeah, quite the introduction. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. It is a pleasure to have you. First of all, shall we talk a little bit about how we sort of met?
Yeah. I believe it was kind of a British Watchmakers Day formally.
Yeah, well, yeah, we properly met at British Watchmakers Day. I remember like our first proper interaction. I think we talked a bit on Instagram, but then once you joined one of our streams.
Yeah.
Like in the build up to the gimlet, to be honest, I'll be honest, I was fanboying a little bit when you were in that stream. I was like,
yeah, I was having a night off uni work that night, and I saw you streaming, so I hopped on.
That was so cool. That was very, very much appreciated. And now you are in Watch Your Words, George, episode 2. So
it's an absolute honor.
You don't have to lie. This whole thing's a shit show.
I think this is my first, other than being kind of having a camera pointed in my face at a couple of watch shows. This is about as formal as I've got so far. So this is, like I say, an honor.
I hope you don't mind me saying, but you've gone places as like Studio Underdog's in-house resident designer. That is quite some position to be in. And with your new project, Anemoic, you are most certainly going places as well. So just back to how we met as well. Yeah. The Gimlet launch party.
Yeah. It was quite the event. I was quite lucky to be there. Actually, as I'm sure we'll discuss later on, I was, deep in my uni project, but got drafted in for the event to take some photos and document the evening. And yeah, what an evening it was.
It was an amazing evening. It was so star-studded as well.
I know the attendee list was pretty mega.
I know. I mean, you had people such as Adrian Barker, Britt Pierce, Andrew Morgan, James McVeigh.
Yeah, me. all the stars were out.
Yeah, I felt so out of place. I was like, how did I get an invite to this?
Like, it was quite a nice event for me as well, because I'd kind of been away from uni, way back at uni, and since being at uni, I've done a little bit of work with Adrian, but never really met him in person. Me and James McVeigh have kind of been chatting online ever since the Passion Fruit project. So it was really nice to meet all these familiar faces from the industry, including yourself, most importantly. And after kind of speaking online.
Yeah. Honestly, it was such a great night. The gimlets tasted amazing. Let's say that. And plus,
they did. Although I had to limit myself to one.
I had a couple. I think I only slept a couple hours that night, and then I was up and queued outside of British Watchmakers for 6:30.
You were. I think I remember seeing your Instagram story, and I think myself and the Studio Underdog team we'd all just kind of rolled out of bed at that point, and we were like, he's already queuing up.
Yeah, and it had the desired effect.
It paid off. I got
my gimlet, and I was very, very happy. Terry arrived half an hour, 45 minutes before the doors opened, and he still got.
He got one as well. Yeah.
Honestly, the insanity around the gimlet, I don't think I've seen buzz around a watch like this within the British watch industry ever.
Yeah, it was. Well, the only time I'd kind of seen it before was obviously the previous years when we were doing the selling the kind of pizza party duo, and very much I remember the conversations being how can we live up to that again. But yeah, selling 200 pieces of the gimlet on the day. I think Richard kind of did the maths, and that's a watch sold every 2 minutes. So like logistically, it's impressive. But like you say, the energy on the day, you know, seeing that queue again. Luckily this time, you know, we could somewhat prepare for it. We weren't sure, you know, how it'd be received, but we knew how to handle a queue a little bit better. I say we. I wasn't actually working on the day of British Watchmakers Day, so the guys did a great job.
Big shout out to Judzia then, because she was working on the till, and she personally sold every single gimlet.
Yeah,
she was doing a spectacular job. So well
yeah,
done her.
She didn't stop.
Yeah, she did not. Like, that was an amazing job that she did. So yeah, well done to Judzia. But obviously the gimlet was a watch that you personally had quite a big hand in, wasn't it? So talk us through your contribution to the design of the gimlet.
So the gimlet, or Project 23 as we were kind of calling it in the office during the kind of the development, was definitely it's the project where I kind of I had to say this. Well, with other projects, to draw a contrast, it was very much, say, the pizza watches. You know, the case of the watch already existed, and it was a case of, you know, iterating on the dial. So we kind of designing the pizza chunks, the Hawaiian and the pineapple and the ham chunks, and, you know, the colorways, and mostly color work with a small amount of design work on the side of it. Whereas with Project 23, that was obviously a bigger challenge, and that was the main challenge was, how do we get the O2 series dial with its 1mm thick sapphire crystal disc into a Brunswick case while it all, you know, coming together nicely. And the big problem was, if we kind of just tried to stick it in a regular 38mm Brunswick case, the crown would end up somewhere kind of horribly low on the wrist, which is obviously, you know, it's just not good watch design. So a lot of the work I did on this was you know, working with Richard and Lee, as you'll know, to get this crown nice and centered on the case, and, you know, to get that drawn up, and then the inevitable back and forth with suppliers to get everything just right, as well as the dial color, of course. But yeah, the expertise of the print itself were left to Lee, who is, as you'll know, is an expert in typography and all things in between.
Oh, he is an absolutely fabulous person, and his expertise at designing fonts, like, are incredible. The new Edwardian edition, which is Fear's standalone special edition, a little bit naughty, I heard, because then each brand's technically supposed to have one limited edition, and it's supposed to be limited to a certain amount, and then isn't it supposed to be limited to 100?
It is, yeah. And then we got away with 200 gimlets because there were two brands, or
and then Fears went, what's 10 more? What's 10 more Edwardian editions? But his work designing that font was spectacular. But last night you were also talking me through how the lime wedge design, or the lime slice design, was all you as well.
Yeah, well, it's not quite as impressive as the font, I must say, but yeah. So the lime kind of motif, obviously the main component of a gimlet is limes. I'll leave it to Nicholas to give you the proper measures. But yeah, so we kind of developed this lime motif, and initially it was for just the fun little sticker that was meant to be kind of in the packaging of the box. And then it ended up on the case back, which I think, you know, as we were talking last night, the simpleness of the case back is a detail that I really like, and pretty proud of.
Yeah, I do love the case back, and I said it to you last night, but I'll say it again. I do wish I emphasized how much I do like the case back and the simplicity of it in our full review. So what else have you had like a big hand in the design of? You mentioned the pizza watch that you had a hand in, gimlet as well, but there was one other sort of major project as well that you had a big impact on, wasn't there?
Yeah, so in about, I think it was my second month of my year in industry at Studio Underdog, the kind of the premise of what became Project Passion became apparent. And yeah, what a project to work on in your second month as a design intern at a watch brand, which is pretty insane. So yeah, so Project Passion, I had a part to play in producing all the kind of concept sketches, which we or kind of left the pitching to Richard, but for Richard to pitch to the guys at Moser. Um, so that was super cool. And then yeah, to be fortunate enough to go over to Geneva Watch Days and see Edouard and Richard stand in front of my sketches while I was in the crowd. That was a pretty special moment.
Yeah, that is so special. Honestly, I think when the Passion was unveiled, I feel like there was a lot of pushback in the community because a lot of people concentrated on the Studio Underdog element without properly understanding the Moser element. A lot of people just
Mm-hmm.
saw, oh, it's a Studio Underdog with a 50 grand price tag. But
Mm.
I and a few other people did acknowledge the fact this is a very almost unique. There's not very many perpetual calendar Moser
Yeah.
at the same RRP packaged with a brand new, like almost shadow launched 03
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
series mono pusher Studio Underdog. And it was so cool, but not enough people acknowledged that. So honestly, it was such a cool project. It remains an amazing project. And it led to as well the 03 series, which, as
Yeah.
you know, I am a massive fan of.
Yeah. Yes. Like you say, the people didn't really pick up on the soft launch, as you say, of the O3 series. And I think as Studio Underdog, the team, Richard and everyone involved, there were learnings to take from the kind of the Moser project. Um, but ultimately, I kind of sat here now. What a project to be just be involved with. And I think all of the Studio Underdog team can kind of testify to that. That it was it was an absolute pleasure of a project to work on with a brand like Moser.
Yeah, I think as well, from my point of view, it was a real watershed moment for the British watch industry because the British watch industry is obviously it only started properly about 20 years ago. We started seeing these brands pop up,
Mm-hmm.
and it's only recently we've been seeing it being taken seriously in the Swiss space.
Yeah.
Bremont's been part of that, taking part in Watches and Wonders. Whatever you have to say about the Terra Nova launch or anything, it was a
I
massive.
like him.
Well, I'm a massive fan of the new Altitude collection,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that moment was a watershed moment for the British watch industry. A British brand displaying at Watches and Wonders, and I feel
Yeah.
like the Studio Underdog collaboration with Moser was another part of a major, very well respected horological brand taking a British brand seriously enough to do an official collaboration with them.
Yeah, I think like you say, it was a moment where almost the Swiss industry kind of saw Studio Underdog and just kind of gave us a little thumbs up, or their seal of approval almost.
Just as the name, I think more than anything, they saw the passion and they went, "That's something we can get behind."
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So talk us through. Obviously, you mentioned you were a intern. You were
Yeah.
a well, you're doing product design at university. How did you get
Yeah.
involved with Studio Underdog?
It's quite a story. So as part of I start properly. I've always kind of been into watches. My interest in watches stems, I think, from going on holidays to Turkey and buying Turkey watches, or what they like to call genuine fakes.
Looky.
And yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so I think my interest in watches kind of began to develop then, whether I realized it or not. Watches were always kind of something that were a part of my childhood. And then over over kind of COVID, my dad started collecting vintage digital watches, which also kind of piqued my interest, leading to when I did a foundation course after my A levels. I tried to design a digital watch then. And then I started my degree in product design at Sheffield Hallam University, and still interested in watches, but nowhere near the kind of level I am now. And I remember, I'm not sure how I came across it, but I remember seeing Studio Underdog on an episode of About Effing Time, and just thinking, seeing the design, and one of the things I remember sticking out to me as something that I was like, yeah, that's pretty sweet, was the split logos and text at 12 o'clock on the 01 series, and just seeing that, and I was like, but that is a pretty awesome little design detail, and it's so obvious. Why has no one done that before? And then so I just I began to appreciate the brand, and slowly get more and more into watches. Kind of at the same time, my dad's interest in mechanical watches also began to develop. And then, as part of my degree in product design, we do something, or you're encouraged to do something called a year in industry. So basically, you do the first 2 years of your studies, then you take a year out to try and find a placement or an internship to develop yourself as a designer. And then in your fourth year, you'll come back and finish your degree, which is where I'm at now. And getting one of these internships is quite the task. They're kind of sold to you initially as something that, oh yeah, you'll get one, but it is really quite the challenge. And I was very fortunate to land my internship, but it wasn't easy. So I began applying to various advertised internships, but also even just junior designer job opportunities, saying I'm not really want a junior design role. I just like to kind of be around for a year, but what can you offer? And it's really, really tough. And I ended up kind of getting to some interview stages with Burberry was the placement everyone wanted on my course. Same with designing for Triumph. And I kind of get to the interview stage of those, but then inevitably, fail at that stage. And you've got to remember that ultimately you're competing with every other design student in the country for this same placement. Then, things weren't going very well. The only placements I was getting anywhere with was the ones where I was completely blagging it in the interview.
So that's how you do interviews.
Well, an example of this is I applied for something called content design at Autodesk, who are a kind of CAD company. And I just saw designer in the title. I was like, apply for that one. And turns out content designer is the role where basically you're using a computer software, and you hover over a tool, you write the text that is in the tooltip for that tool. So nothing really to do with design, more something you'd be better suited to if you had a degree in English literature or something. So I was blagging my way through these interviews, and unfortunately for them, I kept going further and further. But to cut that story short, there is that ultimately, applying for placements, especially ones that I actually wanted, weren't going very well. And then I had a bit of downtime between projects in my second year. And, I was at the time, like I said, a fan of Studio Underdog. So I sketched up some design concepts and posted them to my at the time, rather small watch Instagram account. And I was quite lucky at the time that these sketches got Richard's attention, and he reshared them and kind of put up a poll. I think it was Christmas time, and I designed three watches. I think one was a Christmas tree themed Studio Underdog 01 series. The next was coconut themed, and then the final one was rhubarb and custard. So like the sweet, so a pink upper dial with a yellow lower dial. And Richard, saw these and kind of reshared them on his story with a little poll, and I was like, sick, this is awesome. Yeah. Studio Underdog have seen my sketches and shared them. And then I did a couple more and gradually began to pester Richard a little bit more, up until the point where I kind of worked up the courage to ask him, just to have a chat, because I'd learned through kind of doing more research about the brands that Richard was kind of followed a similar route to myself, of where he studied product design at university. And at the time for me, I was like, well, how the hell do you get into designing watches from product design? I thought you'd have to go to kind of some do some kind of specialist degree where you learn how to design watches, and that transfer from product design would be quite a challenge. So I had a nice chat with Richard. He spoke to me about his design process, and gave me some tips for kind of moving forward with university. And I very cheekily left it on the note. I was like, well, if you ever need a junior designer at Studio Underdog, you can you know where to ask. And we left it there. And then a couple of months later, I got a message on LinkedIn from Richard about some potential freelance work on a project. And obviously, I bit his hand off at the opportunity to work on this. So I started doing, I think it was, a couple of weekends a month, working on this project with Richard here and there.
And what was that project?
It's not out yet. It's not out. It hasn't really been touched since I started my year in industry. So, it'll probably need to be revisited and updated now that I've no doubt come on quite a little bit as a designer since then.
So is it a little bit similar to the Gimlet, where it was Project 23? I'm assuming that was because it was meant to come out initially in 2023.
Yeah.
And that project has just sort of stretched on, maybe expanded a little bit in complexity.
Who knows? I mean, it is a really cool project, but it's something that, it's on ice.
Can you tell us whether it's a collaboration or not a collaboration, or is it a solo Studio Underdog?
I'm not gonna give anything away.
Fair enough. I had to ask. I had to ask. Yeah. It's really interesting that you mention what the route into Studio Underdog was. And you were sort of wondering what your route into designing watches would be. And obviously you've taken the product design route, but there's been, even just having worked at Fears, knowing the guys at Fears, for example, Nicholas, he got into designing the original Redcliffe, the original Brunswick 38, because he had that background in watchmaking rather than product design. Fears, for example, they've got a dedicated CAD person, dedicated design person in Lee, and they've also got Nicholas, who does have a lot of input still. But it's really interesting, the different routes that people have into the industry.
I think it just shows that, if you're really passionate about something, passion. Here we go again. You can kind of make it work.
And evidently talent. You definitely have a lot of that.
I'm not sure about that.
oh, you do. There's a reason people went mad for this, and it's your talent. And it's the talent and amazingness of everyone involved, from Nicholas, Lee, Richard, yourself. Like, you're all amazing people, and you're all extremely talented, and everyone else on the Fears and Studio Underdog teams, having met everyone at Studio Underdog, I think everyone's lovely, everyone's extremely passionate, and exactly the same for everyone at Fears. I cannot say anything negative about any of you.
I think that's it with, especially brands like Fears and Studio Underdog. Everyone's so passionate about it that when brands like that come together, it's a recipe for success. But that doesn't mean we didn't try hard.
Yeah, of course. And it's evident how seriously you take everything, how hard you all try, but also how much you inject fun into everything.
Yeah. That's the name of the game, really.
Yeah. And there's no point in doing it if you don't have fun. And that's what Studio Underdog's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's about having fun with watches, something that is traditionally very, very stuffy. And that's why I think Terry and I connect with the brand, and why so many other people do, because we try and have fun with on the channel and stuff. Yeah.
And I think designing the watches is one thing with all the playful colors involved, but then because we're such a small team, we're all very much involved in kind of every step of the process. The next best fun thing is how do we tell the story of these watches? And that's why Richard is a bit of a mastermind.
Yeah.
That's his specialism.
Well, hopefully in future, there's a lot I could say about Richard. All positive, of course. But there's a lot I could say, but I'll save that for when we hopefully in future interview him. But we've got something else to talk about, haven't we?
We do.
I've already mentioned. I think we've spent more than enough time on studio because this is about you.
This is all about me.
This is all about you and how amazing you are and how amazing your personal project, Anemoic, is. Now, what is Anemoic? I can't even say it. What is Anemoic?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
So, Anemoic is basically my final year university project. That's, fundamentally that is what it is. So, as I mentioned, I finished my internship or year in industry. It sounds a little bit better. Studio Underd0g at the end of May last year.
Yeah.
And then I then returned to university in September, and kind of from then this little project of my own has been bubbling away, which has been quite the task, to be honest, to design something of your own. It's I think you get into a habit, doing freelance design and working for a company. It's quite nice to be given a design brief and then just been like, okay, I can execute that. Whereas when you have to make the design brief yourself, it's a whole other story.
Suddenly all so open-ended, and
you've
only got yourself to answer to now, as well as everyone that you'll be showing the watch off to.
Yeah, no pressure.
Oh, no pressure at all. Of course not. I honestly, so much kudos to you. I can't imagine the stress of putting your heart and soul, hundreds, if not thousands of hours into the design of this beautiful thing, and then thinking, what's everyone on the internet going to say? The internet's not often a kind place.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've built up somewhat of a resilience to that. There's people are very vocal, especially on kind of projects that I've been involved with in the past that have been released. People aren't afraid to share their opinions online, but ultimately, I think it's as a product designer, you've got to have some kind of resilience, but also at the end of the day, if no one likes it, I like it, so that's what matters, really.
So Anemoic, that's not a word I've heard before. Definitely doesn't say Anemoic. Not
to be confused.
Not to be confused with Anemoic, but what does Anemoic mean? What is that word?
The reason you won't have seen it before is because it's not actually in the dictionary. But there's a kind of a popular author where this author's kind of coined terms and words for feelings that everyone can kind of empathize with or relate to, but there isn't a word for it. So anemoic is the kind of the adjective of the term anemoia, which is a nostalgia for a time you never experienced. So the best kind of way I can explain this to hopefully let people relate is, if you've ever looked at an old photograph and kind of wished you could step inside it, that feeling that you would experience then is what anemoia would be, and therefore that photograph would make you feel anemoic.
I definitely relate to that feeling, and I think so many people have. For example, one may have, for example, playing something like Red Dead Redemption. I've had that feeling like, I wish I was a cowboy or an outlaw living in the wild. And like, I mean, I've got that nostalgia for a time I never experienced. Anemoic, obviously, really cool words. You said it's been made up, but that's where language comes from. Shakespeare famously made up loads of words. So who's the author? Who can we credit for the name?
Yeah, so it's the term anemoic is from a book called The Dictionary of Obscure Shadows by an author called John Koenig. And basically, he's an author who, in this book, he's created words for feelings which don't already have words. So feelings which everyone can empathize with. Yet there isn't a word in the dictionary to describe it.
Well, I love that word. I'm going to be adopting it into my own lexicon, into my own dictionary, internal dictionary of words, and I will be describing things as anemoic from now on. So
There you go.
it's a nostalgia for a time that you've never experienced.
Yeah.
Looking at the watch, it does appear as though the time that you have a nostalgia for might be the 1920s. That's that sort of Art Deco era. That sort of Art Deco era.
Not quite.
No.
No.
What?
Let me give you the spiel, shall I?
Oh, spiel me, please.
So one of the biggest things I learned at Studio Underdog is, it's one thing to just have a really good product. But the next most important thing, or equally as important, I should say, is the storytelling. So for my design project, my final design kind of project at university, I could have very easily just designed a field watch, and it just been a really good product. But as I learned through my year in industry, there's a lot more that goes into it with designing a watch. So I wanted to design the brand as well and the storytelling that came along with this watch. So it's kind of, I'd like to say it's a popular opinion that in the enthusiast community of watch collecting, people buy watches to make them feel something, someone, or somewhere. So for an example, buying a Cartier tank and wearing that can just make you feel a little bit more refined and ready to go out for a nice dinner. Just feel a little bit more dressed up. And it can also take you back to the era where that was more commonplace, going out for dinner, getting dressed up, than it is today. And even you don't have to put on the Cartier tank to do that, but just wearing it can kind of give you that connection to that era or that time or that feeling. So the idea with the brand Anemoic was to leverage the watch as a vessel to do this. So basically, I to do this, I had to set up a design framework. So, step one was to define the time and place. So where did I want to take people back to with this watch? What decade and what location? And then it was to define the atmosphere. So what is a kind of pivotal cultural moment in this era and this location that I can focus on and kind of use that to help inform the design process. And then from that event, I would pick, kind of identify the key triggers of anemoia. So what are some key elements that I can draw upon for the design that people can relate to without to evoke their own anemoia for this era. And then step forward to design the damn thing. So for this watch, the period I wanted to take people back to was 1970s France, and that was mainly to do with the time of designing this watch. I would describe myself as having anemoia for this period. So it was as simple as designing a watch that could make me feel like I could kind of step back into this era. And why is that? Well, 1970s kind of watch design is the golden era almost. I think a lot of people like to focus on the integrated sports watches, that Genta was responsible for of that era. But equally at that time, there was the design of dress watches were just so out there because they had to be to compete with the quartz watches at the time. So the design language of mechanical watches, especially dress watches of that time, is particularly unique. And as a designer, there's so much kind of visual information to go off. And then kind of why France? Well, that was kind of the elements of fashion at the time. The one from the watch design houses like Cartier and Boucheron, but also kind of multidisciplinary designers like Pierre Cardin, who you know, at the time collaborated with Jaeger to produce the Espace collection, which is an awesome collection of watches. So that was that's the reasoning behind the time and place, and then finding the atmosphere to kind of focus in on and use to inform the design process was almost the most fun part. So I ended up landing on something called the Battle of Versailles, which wasn't a battle during a war, except it was a fashion showdown, which was initially billed as a charity fundraiser. So the wealth of visuals and photography and documentation of this event to go off is just, you know, looking at these photographs of this event of these supermodels clad in sequins and silk and jewels, walking down the Palace of Versailles, which at the time was slightly derelict, by candlelight. You know, you'd have a hard time not feeling anemoia or feeling anemoic about this event, looking at these photographs. So that was kind of the perfect event to pinpoint on, and then, yeah, as I said, design onwards from.
Yeah, honestly, I can't think of a better era you could have chosen. I don't think any decade has been more influential on watches and watch design and the future of watchmaking than the 70s. Obviously, you mentioned Genta, and his impact far outstretched the integrated bracelet sports watches he was making.
Yeah,
he had, but for example, we even today the brand Gerald Genta, whatever one thinks of it, he had a hugely outsized effect on the whole industry, as well as obviously the quartz crisis and everything. But
while we're on the topic of Genta, during this project, as I'm sure we'll come on to, I've kind of been able to lean on a wealth of connections from, you know, my time in the industry. And one of the people who's kind of had an input, I was fortunate enough to have kind of land myself a Zoom interview with Alexia Genta, so Gerald Genta's daughter, who she helps out with the Gerald Genta Heritage Association. Wow. And yeah, we had a great chat about her father's design work, you know, his ethos, and it was particularly kind of eye-opening to learn about his outlook on watch design while informing this project of my own.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I was a fan of Gerald Genta's later work. A lot of it is a little bit too out there for me, but particularly his early and to sort of mid work was, I mean, the effect it's had. Many of those collections are still going, and some of those collections are the biggest, most sought after collections in the industry to this day. And I think one watch that I believe he designed that I wish Rolex would bring back, is that the Midas? Was that a Genta design?
Yeah. I believe that is a Genta design. Yeah,
that is a watch I do wish that they do something with, because having a Genta designed watch in your collection, especially one as unique and stand out as that, I just wish it was still there. Everyone knows the Nautilus, the Royal Oak, but the Midas I think is a little just underappreciated gem.
Absolutely.
Obviously, in choosing France as well, you could have very easily chosen Switzerland, but choosing France because of the fashion impact as well is it's an inspired choice, really, particularly when you're looking and you're talking and combining it with a brand like Cartier in the language that you're using. And there are there's flashes of Cartier and JLC in the design, as well as numerous other brands. For example, obviously, it's a very Art Deco design. You've got the rectangular case. It's very dressy. So it's a very simple handset, but very effective. So you've got flashes of all of these brands in there as well. So really, yeah, just an inspired choice of the era, especially with the name and the particular event that you chose, Versailles. Yeah. Because just for all of you guys watching, that is the name of the watch. It is called the Versailles, which is just a beautiful name and does conjure just images of pure beauty and elegance that you picture when you think of the Palace of Versailles. And even very much the town of Versailles.
Yeah, I think, like you say, especially when you've seen the imagery of the Battle of Versailles, when you just hear the word Versailles, it's hard not to then picture in your mind these kind of, like I said, these supermodels in these rather outrageous outfits. You know, it kind of, like you say, it conjures those emotions of opulence and this kind of luxury that, you know, I don't think we've really seen. It's hard to kind of think that we've kind of seen such stuff since.
Yeah. I mean, I think that era was absurd. Looking back, we're not going to see another era like it in fashion. I don't think. Like, you only have to look back at some of the designers of the era, and the world was so out there.
Yeah, it was a different place.
Even by today's standards, everything was so out there, and I think you have captured that, because you have captured that feeling. Just looking at the faceted crystal that you're using, you've just sort of thrown out the rule book and gone, I want to do something. I mean, this isn't going to have curves. It's going to be faceted down even to the crystal. And we will talk more about the crystal, but an amazing choice with that.
Thank you. Yeah. So the inspiration from the kind of faceted design, which, as you mentioned, is present throughout the entire watch, comes from pinpointing, as I mentioned earlier, those triggers of anemoic. So one of those that I identified was, as I mentioned already again, was the jewelry that these supermodels were wearing at this event. So these massive jewels, you know, they're very hard to miss in these photographs of the Battle of Versailles. So yeah, so that obviously influences the kind of the faceted shape of the crystal and the case. So the crystal and the case kind of come together very much like the case is there to display the jewel of the ring, which is the crystal of the watch.
Yeah.
And that's also influenced, you know, by the faceted design, but also the curved case back itself is, you know, this is probably me reaching as a designer, but it's the curvature of the case back is almost symbolic of the inside of a ring. So you can imagine the stone on top and then the curve of the ring beneath. And if you were to extend the case back round, eventually it would kind of form that circle.
You've very much taken a jeweler's approach to the design of this watch, and it's more in a more literal way, even than a lot of brands, even like Cartier, take a jeweler's approach. Cartier will design a watch as something, well, particularly in some of their very much more jewelry watches, they'll design it as a bracelet. You have designed it very much as a ring with a jewel, with a setting, the crystal being the jewel and the case being the setting, and it is inspired.
You've explained it better than me there.
Yeah, like it is amazing, and I've only connected those dots whilst being on call with you, but it is amazing to see, because you don't see it very often. I think there are other brands that have flashes of that, for example, and we talked about them yesterday. Anoma, they took they took a similar approach, but it's very much more contemporary, whereas you have very much more of an Art Deco approach to the whole process, very much more dressy. And I hope you don't mind me mentioning Anoma, but everything, well, at the end of the day, everything has inspiration from everywhere. And the Anoma is an amazing watch, so it's certainly not a negative drawing that comparison.
No, I'm a huge fan of, you know, Matteo's work, and what he's done with Anoma is pretty exceptional. So I'm happy for that comparison to be drawn.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's another watch that's had a lot of interest. Another faceted crystal, but that leans very much on that asymmetry, whereas this does look like a piece of, I mean, high jewelry.
Yeah. So another element which isn't kind of clear yet. Obviously, I've been slightly limited with what I can achieve in the times of a uni project. But another consideration, depends how closely people look at some of the imagery available, is the buckle is also a pretty unique design. So the buckle actually is designed to pass the tail of the strap through to the inside of the wrist, so that basically the strap has this seamless aesthetic or appearance, which also relates to the fashion of the time. So all French fashion in the kind of 1970s, couture clothing design, so made to measure was the kind of the current trend or the status quo. So that the strap draws influence and inspiration from that as well. So there's all these little nuggets of design that it's hard to I think there's a temptation to say it all at once, but yeah, stuff that kind of people can kind of discover as they learn more about my little project. A fun other nugget is the buckle is actually directionally proportionate to the size of the case. So if you were to scale the case profile down by, I think it's 0.72%, or times it by 0.72, you have the proportions of the buckle. Same for the buckle. It also replicates the curvature of the case back as well.
I did spot that.
So every, it might just be a little uni student's project, but yeah, every design detail really has kind of been angsted over to the nth degree.
I even think that the crown is something that is incredibly beautifully designed. It carries on. It almost looks like it should have a faceted cabochon on it.
Yeah, that was actually something I considered during the design process, but it was one of those ones where I think the watch as it is treading a fine line between being quite treading that very, very hard to tread line between this really opulent object versus being something that you might be described as quite gaudy, and you find at Claire's fashion accessories on the high street. And it was one of those ones where I kind of sketched it up and thought about it, and that if this crown had an aquamarine, small aquamarine faceted sapphire in it, would it just be that step too far? And I ended up kind of steering away from it.
I think you have made the right decision there, because I do think if you were to have, for example, a synthetic aquamarine cabochon, I think it would draw away from the spectacularness of the dial, which am I correct in saying it's CNC guilloche aluminium, as well as that crystal. Now, I think we've danced around it long enough. That crystal, what's going on there?
Yeah, so the crystal is definitely, to coin more design language, is the USP of the watch. It is the piece that hopefully people like to speak about. So currently, as we've mentioned, this is a student project where currently the end goal was a set of prototypes. So the current crystal is a piece of faceted aquamarine spinel. So not sapphire. Spinel is almost as hard as sapphire, and that's kind of purely been used from my point of view at the moment, as it's more affordable to get your hands on aquamarine spinel than sapphire, and for the case of a set of prototypes, it more than fits the bill. So this piece of aquamarine spinel, which as we mentioned is faceted, is really the star of the show, and one of the kind of the reasoning for this is, my background at Studio Underdog are known for their colorful dials.
Yeah.
So it would have been quite easy for me to, coin up another bright colorful dial. But yeah, instead adding the color to the crystal is a different way of doing it. So as you'll be able to see from the imagery, the dial itself is actually raw of color. So it's raw aluminium, so it's essentially bare metal in color, and then all the color is added through the aquamarine spinel crystal.
I think that is an amazing way of doing it as well, because it's very much again leaning towards that jewelry route. You get the color of a piece of jewelry, very rarely from the setting, from the metal it's set in.
Yeah.
And they specifically often go for a neutral setting because it tends to draw more attention and reflect better into the stone. I know that's why more often than not, even when you find a yellow gold ring, the setting itself will be white gold because it reflects into the stone better. So yeah, you've definitely taken that jewelry route, and I think it's a really inspired choice to add the color by way of crystal. And even long term, I'm thinking sapphire itself, which I know that you're planning to use aquamarine, aren't you?
Yeah, that would be if this was to kind of, there's a whole other world after kind of people seeing this. But yeah, I mean, one of the initial idea was to use aquamarine sapphire, but there's other approaches that could be taken as well.
The amazing thing is sapphire is such a versatile stone that it can be any color. So long term, you could look at doing this watch in numerous colors just by way of changing the color of the crystal rather than the dial, which is
absolutely,
which is so cool.
And there's also, I'd be lying if it wasn't something I've already looked into. You can go shopping on these stone websites. You can even get crazy stuff where the top half of a stone is pink and like the bottom half is yellow. So the opportunity
is called water. So if it's pink and
green, there's watermelon tourmaline. Tourmaline. Yeah.
That would be such a cool watch, and very much. I think that would be a great Anemoic Studio Underdog collaboration.
Yeah. I think the main challenge, and this has been one of the challenges with even developing a set of prototypes, is being able to get the rough stone, which I have one in front of me here. Being able to get rough material in the size that you need it. So this piece here of aquamarine spinel will just about make one or maybe two watch crystals, which at the moment, I think we mentioned last night, are all being hand cut by a very, very talented lady called Tara Kuma, who's a lapidurist who I've kind of collaborated with to just make the prototypes.
So do you know how long it takes her to cut one crystal?
Longer than she expected, because I got quoted an amount, and then it was about half as much more than than quoted. I don't have a specific number of hours, but it was it's not an afternoon job. And the main challenge for that is, as I mentioned, Tara is a lapidurist, so she's used to cutting gemstones for rings. Whereas the challenge with a watch crystal is it's an insanely flat area to get perfectly flat, and then to get to the tolerances required of a watch crystal is a completely other story. So luckily, I found Tara, who's an absolute superstar, really.
And also, I suppose when you're looking at cutting a stone for a ring, you're thinking of something a lot smaller.
Yeah.
So smaller imperfections in the surface, they don't draw as much attention. Whereas something like a watch, you are genuinely staring at the crystal.
Yeah,
that's what it's for. You mentioned Tara, who has been instrumental in getting the stones cut. Amazing. Expert at what she does, but you've also had some help from some other individuals, haven't you, in bringing this project to life? Do you want to tell me a little bit more about them?
Yeah, so just a few names to name drop, really. Obviously, Richard from Studio Underdog has been pretty instrumental in not just this project, but also, my entire development as a watch designer. He was the guy who took a chance on a student posting concept sketches to an Instagram story. But as part of kind of his contribution to this project, not only, all the stuff I learned while at Underdog. You know, I hadn't used Adobe Illustrator before I joined at Underdog, and now I'd like to think of myself rather proficient at it.
Yeah.
As well as, you know, so for this project, Richard's contributed massively. One, to just, you know, how the hell do you go about this process? How do you create something of your own? And then the business side of things. So, you know, costing things up. How do you create an estimated price for a watch? How do you do that? But also, Richard's been very, very generous in helping to produce a set of sample watches due for delivery kind of around mid-June, you know, mid-June, early July, when they'll be ready. So yeah, to actually be able to get hands-on with a working prototype of this watch is a pretty special thing.
Yeah, I do think if you did a Kickstarter, this watch would go mental. This watch would go mad.
And then yeah, who else? So one of the kind of goats of the scene I reached out to was Mike France. So he was pretty instrumental rather early on in the project, and just, as I mentioned, similarly to Richard, introducing me to kind of the business mindset of a watch brand. You know, how do you go about creating something of your own? But also, one of the questions I asked Mike was, obviously this was kind of off the heels of their introduction of the Bel Canto. So I was like, how do you design something that has that effect? How do you do that? How do you create this hero product? And, you know, sitting here now knowing the Loco's just come out, you know, he's not done it once, but he's done it twice.
Yeah, he truly has.
So he was pretty instrumental in that, kind of giving me that mindset. And then Andrew Morgan as well. He was pretty. I'd say, you know, I don't think this project would really be where it is, especially the storytelling, without his input. So as we kind of discussed, my background as a product designer, so I can answer. I'd like to think I can answer someone's brief and kind of hand off a product. But when it comes to storytelling, you know, I kind of know the story I want to tell, but I often don't have the words to actually say it. So Andrew, we spoke on multiple occasions of it kind of be a case of me coming to him like, oh, okay, I've got this idea for what this project might be. And I just kind of gobbledygook to him. And then, as I'm sure everyone will know, Andrew is he's a master of storytelling. You know, I don't think there's many other people in the scene who speak as well as he does. And he really helped me to kind of refine the message of the brand. In terms of, it was like I was trying to say too much, or I was trying to communicate everything at once, when in reality you often kind of need to pare the story back and let people discover it themselves. And then on the technical side of things, as we mentioned, Tara was super helpful. The prototypes wouldn't exist without Tara, because I'd have no one else to cut these crystals for this watch. So the crystal wouldn't exist without her. And then other elements like the dial. So I've worked with Bedford Dials, who are, I think, probably one of the only, if not one of the few, dial manufacturers here in the UK. So that's been an awesome process to kind of oversee every step of designing this dial. And, you know, it's still, as you'll see on the photos I've shared of the dials, it's still in an early prototype stage. It's not perfect yet, but having that kind of immediacy to oversee, you know, where stuff might be going wrong and suggest tweaks has been a great process. And then as a designer, you know, your role doesn't stop at just designing the product. You need to design everything around it. So in terms of designing the strap pairing and the travel pouch and other stuff like that. So that's where David Richards of the Strap Tailor has come in handy. Obviously, I kind of already had a relationship with him thanks to Studio Underdog. But yeah, David's been a bit of a superstar as well in terms of helping me develop this bespoke strap. So this marine Alran goatskin strap with an Alcantara lining, as well as, you know, pushing him to his limits slightly outside his comfort zone in designing the travel pouch as well that comes with the watch, or would come with the watch.
Yeah, well, that is such an amazing list of people. You really have worked with some of the absolute goats of the British watch industry there. And also, the thing that stuck out to me whilst you were talking about that group of people is how much of the work on this watch has been done in the UK. For example, Bedford dials. You've even had the dial made in this country. The Tara, I'm assuming, is based in the UK as
she's
well.
based in the UK as well.
So getting the crystal done in the UK is amazing. The strap with the strap tailor, that is amazing too. So one question is, where is the case done?
So the case, so the imagery of the case, which people will kind of be seeing now, is an early prototype, which has actually been machined at my university in Sheffield. So that is. Yeah, so I've been a bit of a headache for the guys in the CNC workshops.
Yeah,
these guys are used to cutting and CNCing car parts, so you can imagine the difference in scale is pretty astronomical.
When they have to start working to a tolerance of microns, the game changes slightly, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it was quite the challenge for them and involved them ordering a load of new drill bits. So that the imagery of that early prototype case was made at university during term time. So just to add more pressure to them, and I've been quite honest. I've tried to not over Photoshop anything. You can see that this case has been made at university. It's not to the level that you'd expect of a finished watch, but this is part of the design process. And almost, in terms of, I don't know many watch companies which will be able to design a product with a full CNC workshop literally 10 minutes down the road.
Yeah.
So almost, despite this being a university project, I've been able to work really closely with these guys who actually make the thing. And to kind of be able to get these early prototypes, relatively quickly. And that's not only kind of CNC components, but also, having a 3D printer next to me while I've been designing, being able to CAD up the watch itself, hit print, and then 45 minutes later have something that I can try on has been, that kind of method of design has come through the necessity of this being a uni project and me only having kind of, less than a year to design and develop this watch, but also that kind of challenge has posed its benefits at the same time.
Yeah, honestly, I think I've said it before, but you have taken such a unique approach to doing this as well, and doing it as a uni project with those facilities that you alluded to in the CNC department, and really challenging them, making them order the new drill bits and stuff. It really shows through in, well, obviously you've taken a long time over this, but every single piece being brand new and designed by you, other than the movement itself, it really is a testament to how hard you've worked and your skill and talent.
It's been quite the fast-paced project. I mean, one of the things when I've kind of been speaking to this project, speaking to people about this project is usually, so as I mentioned, I'm having a set of prototype watches arrive for mid-June, early July, and so those are manufactured using Studio Underdog's manufacturers. And usually the process between submitting a CAD drawing and a technical document and suppliers, there's still a back and forth between them, because we have an idea as designers of what's achievable, but then these are the guys who really know what they can do with their machining, so and machines and tools. So there's usually quite a lengthy back and forth. This can take it can take a few months of just going, I just want to tweak here, this measurement's not quite right, and then they'll say, well, we can't do that, so we have to compromise here. Whereas I needed to get these files approved basically for delivery early July for a student design show, which is kind of in early July. So I wanted to have these final prototypes by then. So the back and forth between me shipping off this technical document and getting an approved set of technical drawings back from the supplier only took a week.
Wow.
When it usually, as I mentioned, takes, it can take a couple months. So it's been fast paced, but that's also not to mean that stuff's been rushed. Um, this really has been the project that I've kind of, every day I've lived and breathed for the past, I don't well since September.
That really does come across, and it's not. I did mention the movement, and I don't want to stick on the specs of the watch for too long because I think the real standout is the design, but I don't think it can be overlooked. The specs of the watch certainly aren't to be sniffed at. You're using the top end Le Joux Perret D101, which is the same movement that almost the same movement, just with the small seconds removed, as and this is not to disparage the Brunswick 38, of the much more costly Brunswick 38, exactly the same movement, sans small seconds, which gives you a power reserve of 50 hours, I believe. And you also talked to, tell us about what the timing tolerance is as well.
Yeah, so obviously we're still at the stage where this is just a uni project with, there's no PO been sent out for a batch of 5,000 watches just yet. However, there's a high likelihood that if anything were to ever happen with this project, having already worked with the guys at Horologium, it'd likely be anything kind of UK based is likely to be assembled there. So obviously, I gave Raphael a cheeky little WhatsApp and said, if we were to have a watch with a D101, what could you what tolerance is pretty reasonable? So that's where it'd be kind of +5, -5 seconds a day.
Which is absolutely amazing. Again, you'd be looking at doing, if this does turn into a real product, you'd be looking at doing even the assembly in the UK. So this really is a chance to champion British watch industry in the dial manufacture, in the crystal manufacturer. If you did stick with Tara for
I'm not sure her fingers could take the workload.
That's certainly fair enough. So tell us, what if you were looking to bring this to market, which I'm sure a lot of the people watching would love to see it become a real thing, what sort of price would you be looking at?
So according to my calculations, which I don't know how much I trust myself now, it'd be around the £1,900 mark, and that would be including that. So that's where I've costed everything up to at the moment. It's I'm keen to reiterate, this is still a uni project.
Yes.
No doubt, if anything were to ever to become a real thing, there's further kind of R&D to be done, especially with elements like the crystal, and to get everything to a stage where it would be something that I'd be kind of pleased with, and happy for people to fork out their hard-earned cash on.
We talked a little bit about the Best of British Watch show in Brighton yesterday, and one of my standout memories from that show, it was the first time I'd met Nicholas, and it was the first time I'd seen Nicholas. This is Nicholas Bowman-Scargill, of course, of Fear's fame. It was the first time I'd seen him speak, and he was on a panel, and what he said was, everyone in the British watch industry has this mindset that a rising tide, it floats all ships. It brings everyone up. And I think the other side of the channel, those on the continent, particularly in the Swiss space, do have a mindset of, it's very combative. When particularly in the enthusiast space, the enthusiast watch space, you're not competing for people's money. People are going to buy multiple watches. You just, you've got to work together to make excellent things that people want to buy. And then if people want to buy it, they're going to buy it. Whereas I think in Switzerland, it's very much more combative. They're sort of going, that's my patent. Get away. Yeah, so it's honestly it's honestly amazing to see that collaboration, that community, and it's something I've experienced as well. I mean, I experienced that community from the moment I first stepped into Best of British Watch Show, and I'll tell this story very quickly. I obviously knew all about Richard Bent's Rhymes with Fence from well, obviously because it's Richard Bent's. He's a member of the GPHG. He's the mastermind behind the inception of Studio Underdog, and we covered Studio Underdog numerous times on the channel up to that point. So I walk up to Studio Underdog, and he goes, "Hey George, how's it going?" And I'm like, yeah, it was honestly
starstruck.
Yeah, I was. It was a pinch me moment. Yeah, he was obviously starstruck as well, having seen me on YouTube.
Absolutely.
On YouTube, yeah, absolutely, of course. So, Magnus, we've talked a little bit about we've talked at length about Studio Underdog. Yeah. Anemoic, amazing project. Can't wait to see where that goes. Hopefully, if it does turn into something, and again, I'll reiterate, currently this is just a student project, but yeah. I'm sure many people watching will be hoping that they'll be able to get their hands on, and I hope I'll be able to get my hands on one and review one on the channel in future.
I'm sure there'll be one or two prototypes flying around somewhere.
But I'm sure a lot of people as well are wondering, someone as deep in the game as you are, what's in your collection?
Yeah, so I have, how many watches do I have? I am ashamed to say I have, gosh, probably about 12 or 13 watches in my collection.
Should we talk about the Studio Underdogs just a little bit first? Because you can see Magnus's full collection of his Studio Underdogs on his Instagram. They're featured quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but obviously they're a major fixture in your collection. So how many Studio Underdogs do you have?
So I currently have 7. 7 filling an 8 watch box. So I need one more to complete the collection. But I have a couple.
Or a Moser passion fruit.
I mean, that'd be all right. I wouldn't sniff if Richards goes missing. So I got this little number, and this is a special one. So this is the Strawberries and Cream 01 series, which was a limited edition. I believe there's about 800 of them were made. And I actually got this before I was a fan, before I was employed. So I bought this watch when I was simply a fan of the brand. And yeah, so this was my first Underdog. So I'll never part ways with this one.
That's very meaningful.
Yeah, and then when the 02 series released, it was just me and Ida working at Underdog at the time. So we both got an 02 series. So this is the full moon. And then the next special one I got was the first. So this is the first watch, first design, not just watch, but first design that I had any input in that was released kind of for public sale. So this is the Hawaiian, so the pizza collaboration we did with Time and Tide. And yeah, another special one that I'll definitely never part ways with as my kind of, this was the first thing that I ever had an input on design-wise that people could actually spend their cash on. So
did you have an impact on the pepperoni as well?
I didn't. The pepperoni was already kind of designed, as that was the original April Fool's. Okay. I helped spec up the artwork for kind of sampling and production. But then this one, I played around with a lot of pieces of pineapple and ham on the dial for this one.
I think you got the perfect spread.
It's surprisingly tricky to get something that was reasonably symmetrical while random pizza toppings. Then, of course, this one's actually on loan from the office.
It's yours now. It's not going back.
So yeah, of course the staple watermelon. This is a Gen 3 one actually. So
also with the
yeah,
black backplate, slightly thinner.
Yeah, the ST1901B, and then the kind of raft of small iterative changes we did to the dial. Then the next one I got my hands on was this special one that I'm wearing. So this is the Crew Edition Passion Fruit. So this watch, I'm gonna check I'm holding it the right way around. So obviously working on Project Passion, the collaboration with Moser. Unfortunately, a lot of, well, I'll speak for myself. Unfortunately, I don't have the cash to fork out on a perpetual calendar.
No.
So this was a nice little kind of treat for the kind of contributors to that project, where we could buy this inverted color scheme O3 series passion fruit to kind of commemorate the project and have a little slice of the passion ourselves.
Yeah, that is such a nice way to commemorate the project. And I have to say, I'm very jealous that you have the Milanese bracelet for it, because that is something that is on my list to buy for my gimlet.
This one originally came on the black strap, but I think this one looks particularly good on the Milanese.
Yeah, and I've seen this. I've seen the gimlet on the Milanese as well, and it also looks amazing.
Yeah, so and speaking of gimlet,
of course,
this is my personal one. So yeah, so as we mentioned, another project I had a hand in, and yeah, I'd be silly not to pick this one up.
I can't imagine the hours you spent slaving over the gimlet. So of course you have to own one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you get first dibs, or were you forced to queue?
I didn't have to queue. I kind of, fortunately, I was. Yeah, how to put this nicely? I use some liberty to kind of to make sure I got one.
I think as a designer, that's allowed. No one can complain about that. That's okay.
And then yeah. So to round out my collection of Underd0g's, I have this rotten egg. So this is the collab we did with Wrist Check, and the rotten egg, of course, being the kind of rarest of the three. Yeah. This was my granddad actually bought this one originally. So wow. This was his watch, and then recently, kind of for my birthday, he gifted it back to me, which is nice.
So sweet.
Yeah. So this one's a cool one with a particularly kind of intricate amount of iterations on the A1 series dial, which make this one pretty special.
I think that is such a cool collection of Studio Underd0g's. It's one of the coolest collections of Studio Underd0g's that I've seen, 100%. And obviously, you know my thoughts on the O3 series. So having the Reverse Passion O3 series in there, I mean, they all must have a very special place in your heart. But that Reverse Passion, I imagine, is something that's just a little bit extra special for you.
That's the one where, if I'm going to a watch meet or something, that's the one that I usually, if I had to wear an Underd0g, that's the one that I gravitate to, because it's pretty assured no one else is going to have one of those on in the room.
Yeah, I mean, if Richard's there, you can probably assume he'll be wearing
his Moser. He's got two on.
Yeah, and he'll usually be wearing his Moser. Yeah. I mean, I walked around Moser with him at Watches and Wonders whilst he was wearing his passion fruit Moser, and that was a special moment for me. So, what else do you have in your collection?
So I don't actually have all of them with me. I'm missing a couple because I'm between uni and home. But I kind of have I have my four. My four most special watches, or kind of the top. The what I like to call the top box. These are the ones that are not Underd0g's and also have the kind of most value, both sentimentally, but also monetarily as well. So yeah, so this is my first proper Swiss watch. So this is my Caliber 12 Monaco. So I was very lucky to get this when I was 18, so for my 18th birthday.
Wow. And
the story with this one, as I've mentioned already, is going on holiday to Turkey. My dad always used to buy a Turkey watch of a Monaco. So growing up, most of my childhood memories whenever they kind of relate to my dad is me seeing him wearing a Monaco or like a Fonaco, not a real one. So I was very lucky for my 18th birthday to get the real one first. So this is a super special watch.
Not a turkey watch.
No, this is
yeah.
As far as I'm aware, this is a real one.
Yeah. Similar story to my Breitling that I got for my 21st. So that, I think, more so than any other watch, I'm confident that's a watch you will never get rid of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like I think if you had to choose one watch to keep, it would probably be that one, I imagine.
Yeah, that's the one I'd never part with. Yeah.
Even over the reverse passion and everything, that's the one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the one where, although I don't wear it as much as I probably should, it's absolutely the one that I could never part with.
So what's next?
So this one is a more recent pickup, and I got this because I was starting to kind of think about the design of the watch that I'd be designing for my degree project. So this is a JLC Disco Volante.
So cool.
People will know recently there's been a trend of these shaped watches, from Anemoic we've discussed, but also Furlan Mari releasing their own Disco Volante. So this is the original Disco Volante. So this is by JLC, and it has this awesome. I'll take it off this.
That is stunning.
Yeah, so this was a bit of an awesome find. So I think this was pretty much the same price as the Furlan Mari Disco Volante, and obviously by JLC it's a pretty awesome watch, and it has this really cool. It's a compound curve, so it's going to be really hard to show it through photos, but the case curves this way.
Okay.
But then it also dishes this way from this angle. So the profile of this case is absolutely wild. And then you have that internal kind of sunken polished bezel. Super cool watch with this really frustrating crown. So you'll notice the crown is set completely in the case, which when it comes to setting the watch,
I can imagine that's very hard to pull out as well. I think
this is the crown fully out. So in order to set the time, you kind of have to roll the crown, which is particularly annoying when it doesn't have a quick set date. So this one gets worn when the date is right.
But it's such a nice watch to have, and I think it is a watch that very much ties into the era that the Anemoic is tying into.
Yeah, completely. So no doubt this one was kind of, although the watch is quite different, the Versailles is quite different from the design language of this watch in terms of this watch is curvaceous, and the Versailles is pretty angular. You can, like you say, there's definitely inspiration there.
You've almost taken you've used it as a starting point and then gone entirely the opposite direction.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which,
although initially I bought this at the time because I was like, wow, I'd really like to design a watch like this.
But I think it's a testament to how good of a designer that you are, that you had that in your mind and you were malleable enough to go, actually, no, this is cooler. I'm going to go down this route.
Yeah, it's definitely, once you get into that kind of process, it takes on a life of its own, and it's, you just kind of go with the flow almost.
Yeah. Right. What's third?
Third. So 3 out of 4 is another one I got. So reaching out to Mike France, for the development of my project, I asked to get hands-on with a bel canto. And this was my first time kind of spending any real time with a Christopher Ward. And instantly I wanted a bel canto. But for me personally, I have pretty small wrists. I find it quite hard to wear a watch of that size. Yeah. Saying that this Monaco is an absolute beast. But when I'm buying it for myself, so I started kind of looking at the rest of Christopher Ward's range. Picked up this Christopher Ward 12 Halo, which I believe is now discontinued.
I believe you're right.
And I'm sure people will be able to see the similarities of this ultra minimalist style with Moser, which no doubt had a part to play in me picking this watch. But yeah,
well, 12s are cool.
Absolutely. I just love the kind of the minimalist design one, but also the size of this. So this is 36 mil, so it wears super nicely on my wrist. And then also the little pop of rose gold as well, which was, I don't have any precious metal in my collection yet, so this was a way to get a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really cool choice. The 36mm 12, so I'm wearing the 36mm 12 Ti, is such a cool piece, and it's so well. I think it's so well proportioned in 36mm. I think it's even better, personally, than the 40. Well, at least on my wrist. But very, very, very good choice there.
That one's been getting a lot of wear recently. Especially, sometimes I have to wear stuff that isn't a studio Underdog.
Oh yeah, you have to, but you still have to be repping the British watch industry as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like if you were seen at British Watchmakers Day, for example, not wearing a British watch.
Yeah, I am. I actually did that. So the first British Watchmakers Day, it was only setup day, and I turned up. I turned up wearing at the time I don't have it anymore, my Omega Speedmaster, because I was this kind of young, I guess slightly obnoxious kid, and I was like, I want to show people, I'm not just a brand guy, I like watches. So I turned up, and I believe it was both Jose from Isotope and James from Pharaoh were like, why aren't you wearing a Studio Underdog? And very quickly I went back to the hotel and swapped it out.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think maybe not on the setup day, but I think it was definitely best that they pointed it out so you didn't end up wearing the
I wouldn't have worn it. I would have never worn it on the day. I know better than that. But yeah, no, now forever, whenever there's an event, I'll in the days surrounding the event, I'll only be wearing a Studio Underdog.
That's definitely for the best. So if I can count, there's one more.
Yeah, so one more left with me. I have a couple others, but like I said, they're still at uni. So this is my most recent kind of pickup that isn't a Studio Underdog, which is a Rolex, good old Rolex sub. Can't go wrong, really. There's not much to say about. Not much to say about this one. It's kind of gloriously boring, which is what makes these subs so good.
Yeah, strangely enough, I think this would probably be the watch that looks best in a suit.
Yeah, probably. Well, I don't know. The inverted passion fruit looks pretty nice.
Oh, does it?
Yeah,
I think you'd have to definitely be wearing a suit that's very monochromatic.
Yeah.
Or with a lot of purple.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah,
I don't have many Joker suits.
I don't know how I got these scars. I can imagine Joker in a passion fruit or reverse passion fruit. That would be absolutely amazing. Yeah. But Submariner is such a classic choice. Same reason why I want my current dream watch. And hopefully next up is a Explorer 1 36mm, just because it is in the same vein as the Submariner. It's sort of perfect for anything.
Yeah, it's definitely with the kind of the Submariner isn't a cheap watch. It's one of those where I kind of it's a Submariner is going to be a Submariner in 10 years. It's not going to, the trends aren't going to have changed so drastically that a Submariner is no longer as cool as it is now. So it's a pretty safe bet. But yeah, Explorer 1 is pretty hot on the heels.
And I think it's also a great watch for you to sort of almost celebrate the position that you've reached as well in the industry. I think you are at this point a very well-known person within the British watch industry, especially amongst like ultra enthusiasts. There's a lot of people who will know who you are, even if they don't know your name or really who you are. They'll have seen your face on in Studio Underdog stuff, or on Richard's story.
Yeah.
For example, many times I've seen the cardboard cutout that they have of you.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You have become one of those faces that even if people don't 100% know the story behind it, they recognize you.
Yeah, they'll know that annoying little design term from Studio Underdog.
with the cool last name, because Magnus Swann. Magnus Swann. I said it yesterday. That is a very, very cool name.
I can't take any credit for that one.
Well, Magnus, I've got to say it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, mine as well.
Unfortunately, we might have to sort of wrap it up here because Terry's already got an hour and 40 minutes of footage.
Sorry, Terry.
Sorry, Terry. But honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. And as you said, this is your first proper interview.
It is. Yeah, apart from having my camera stuck in my face at various watch shows, this is my first bit of formal business.
So how do you feel it's gone?
I think it's done okay. I don't think I've broken any embargoes, so that's so that's always a win.
And I don't think I've said anything that's going to get me cancelled. That is always something that anyone who knows me does worry about. I have to say,
and we'll leave it there.
It has been a real pleasure, and you'll have to keep everyone posted on on where Anemoic is going. Follow Magnus if you don't already over on Instagram. Follow Anemoic, and I'm sure if you want to see the watch become a reality, harass him with messages. Don't actually harass him, but send him a nice, polite message saying, I love the watch. Go down into the comments on this video as well. Show Magnus all the love. He absolutely deserves it. Or even if you have constructive feedback, let's keep it to constructive. I'm sure he'd also love to read that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Magnus, thank you very much. Thank you as well to all of our channel members. They are absolutely amazing. We love them to bits. And guys, watch yourselves. But also don't forget, Not an Expert merch. Woo! Watch yourself, George.com.